Welcome to PPND-TV. Today, our guest is Lisa Sansom, and we are very excited that she's here. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Senia. Thank you very much.
We're delighted you're here. We always start a PPND-TV interview with asking, tell us about yourself.
I do a lot of different things. It's really hard to encapsulate. I'm a business person, and I know I'm supposed to have an elevator speech, but I have never been able to craft one. So the long version is I work in organizations at the intersection of positive psychology and the workplace. I work in organizational development, so I help leaders be better leaders. I help teams be better teams. I help with employee engagement and employee satisfaction, organizational culture. I'm also a certified coach, so I do a lot of leadership and team coaching as well. I speak, I train, I consult, I coach a wide variety of individuals, and I just generally have a lot of fun in life. I help with the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. I help with the MAP Alumni Association. I have 2 kids and a husband, and just a whole bunch of random fun things.
Well, when you and I spoke just before this interview, you said I'm a juggler. It sounds like it.
I am a juggler. I keep a lot of different balls in the air. There are various sizes and various weights, and I'm really happy that none of them are raw eggs, because if I dropped one, that would be very messy.
Nice. We often start these interviews, because it's for PPND-TV, by asking for you yourself, since you know so much about positive psychology, and a lot of your colleagues do as well, and you work with this in businesses. What is, for yourself, a positive psychology research finding that has most changed your life?
I think that what I have found most interesting, and some of this is my own personal strengths and where I come from, is the power of individualizing positive psychology interventions for that person. One of my favorite books is The How of Happiness, because Sonia Lyubomirsky starts off with an assessment so that you can find out, as the reader of her book, which interventions are more likely to work for you, so you can go for that low-hanging fruit. And there are lots of things out there like gratitude journals, for example. But we know that gratitude doesn't work the same for everybody. It doesn't work the same for men as it does for women. Self-affirmations, which are really big in the world of positive thinking, actually don't work for people with low self-esteem. There are other things that those people need to be doing to feel good about life and to get happiness and well-being. So for me, that's really powerful. There's no broad brush approach, and because positive psychology is so new as a science, we don't know all the little bits and pieces yet. But I just love, for example, strengths constellations, because love of learning with zest is going to show up very differently than a love of learning with humility, for example.
Say a little bit more about strengths constellations in case our viewers don't know about them.
So the VIA Strengths Assessment has 24 strengths. The Clifton Strengths Finder has 34 strengths. There are other tools out there like Realize 2 and Stand Out and a bunch of others. And they're all great assessments. But what most of them do is they give you your top 5 or so strengths and give you what that looks like in isolation. So what does love of learning mean? What does modesty mean? What does zest mean? What does courage mean? And so on. However, what a strengths constellation means is that if you start bundling some of these strengths together, they're going to show up very differently. And that's what makes you a unique you. It's not just that you happen to have the same couple of strengths in the top as somebody else, but the way they show up for you is going to be different, and the way that you use them together. I just think that's very exciting. So there's no one particular piece of research that I get very excited about, but this notion that more and more we can tailor positive psychology interventions to the individual, where they are in that stage of life, who they be, I think that's phenomenally right.
That's lovely, and it makes me think with the Strengths Finder, with the 34 strengths that you mentioned, one of the recommendations of Gallup in terms of applying them at a management level, and you're probably familiar with this, so for our viewers, is that yes, you should cultivate the strengths that you're good at, but all managers should cultivate individualizations, which is so relevant to what you're talking about. What is the individualization, or what is the individual experience of different positive psychology exercises, different things you can do?
Well, and if you start with a very popular and important leadership model around transformational leadership, the bottom level of that, where a lot of practitioners say you need to start cultivating, is called individualized consideration. And it's the amount of time that leaders spend coaching, mentoring in one-on-one connections with the people who report to them. So I do think that's terribly important for managers and leaders. And something that when I propose that to managers and leaders, they all know, they all know it here. Of course I should do that. And then I don't have time. And so that's always the struggle, right? I'm sure you get that too. And so our job is to remind them that it's kind of a pay me now or pay me later situation, right? The time you spend up front individualizing, coaching, and mentoring is going to pay off spades at the end.
I would love to ask you a more concrete and detailed question about this concept. Could you give me an example of either somebody who you've coached one-on-one or some interaction that you've had when you've done a workshop to a group where you really can see individualizing a positive psychology exercise for that person be a very good fit? So something concrete about what you've just described.
So I'm going to talk about a manager that I've been coaching who is having problems with one of her direct reports. The direct report was just being a little resistant, shall we say, to interventions, to attempts. And so I worked with this manager. What did she know about the direct report? What worked well? When did the direct report perform at her best? Kind of all those pieces that we bring in as positive psychology coaches. And we crafted this kind of narrative. We found this thread through all the stories that the direct report performed really well when she was prepared. Mm-hmm. And so this was a real insight for the manager. The manager is very spontaneous, loads of experience. She's going to be retiring in 3 years. She's tremendously experienced. She can walk into an HR labor negotiations cold. She just knows what's going to go on. Her direct report, not so much. Not feeling as confident, wanted to have that background, wanted to feel like she was a little bit more in the know. And then she would get very defensive or upset or lash out when she didn't know what was going on. So that was a real individualization piece. The manager didn't need to be prepared, but her direct report did. And so she had to work more on the coaching and mentoring of her direct report to prepare her for what was coming up. And I'm so happy to say things have turned around 180 for the direct report and their relationship and how they work together. It was just a big eye-opener.
That's perfect. That really answers my question because it's something that's very different from the manager's style, but the manager saw what to do for the direct report.
And was open to doing it, which was amazing because not all managers say, I'm going to try something different. Sometimes we get stuck in the way we see the world. Right. And if it's good for me, then it must be good for everybody. And this manager was so open to trying new things.
Lovely, lovely. So to switch topics a little bit, this is something new that I've learned about you from a small comment that you posted to an article not related to this, but I have learned that you have been thinking about and are potentially in the process of going from thinking to actual screen or written word. You have been thinking about a book. Would love to hear about that.
I have. This has been on my mind for about 3 years. And there's a lot of research I want to do. I have an outline for the book. I know where I want to take it. But as you know very well, writing a book is a big endeavor, not one that one sort of dabbles in. So I am clearing my plate so I will actually be able to work on this. So the concept of the book is catch them doing things right. And it is about the power of positive feedback to help people do more of what works for them. And it's a very general topic because this isn't just the workplace. This is about using positive feedback to create better relationships in the workplace, in your personal life, and also with yourself. How do we catch people doing things right, in the right way, at the right time, in order to create better relationships and move everybody forward?
It's certainly a positive psychology angle, catch someone doing something right. And then you're expanding it to even things like catch yourself doing things right, home, work, teams, groups, organizations.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Because we need to catch ourselves doing things right in order to give us the energy to keep going on and trying new things too.
Right. Completely agree with you. As a coach, I completely agree with you. Lisa, you are an organizer, bar nobody else. There are things that I know that you organize that are just superb, and I would love to hear about your experience of organizing them. So here are two examples that I know of as a recipient or as seeing the fruits of these fairly regularly. You and I are both graduates of the Master of Applied Positive Psychology program, and you are the alumni group newsletter and other types of things organizer with the MAP program. You organize major parts of the Canadian Positive Psychology Association. I'd love to ask you about those, the experiences that you have organizing.
Organizing is just something I've kind of always done. I guess I tend a little towards the OCD kind of side of things. My
Humility.
life is on my Google Calendar. The reason that I bought a smartphone when smartphones came out was so I had access to my Google Calendar on the road. I have used paper calendars for years and years, and then I found out that as I was driving around, my clients would send me an email in the middle of the day canceling our afternoon meeting, and I had no way of accessing it. So it was to be organized that I got myself that smartphone. I think there's a number of things that I do. One is I learned how to type very quickly, so I can send out things and process things pretty quickly, so that certainly helps. Trying to stay on top with my Google Calendar, but I think the biggest thing is just a team. I mean, something like the Canadian Positive Psychology Conference does not organize itself. And I had a large hand in that for the 2012 conference. The 2014 conference is coming up. There's a much bigger team. I have a much smaller role because I had all sorts of other things going on. It's communication, it's recognizing the jobs, it's allocating different pieces to different people, and just getting good people around you, good teams, enthusiastic teams. Honestly, the positive psychology world has some of the most energetic, generous, sharing people that I've ever come across. People love jumping in with both feet and just saying, what can I do to help? And then the challenge is saying, here, there you go, there's something you can do.
Nice. So you're finding a similar interaction in terms of the MAP, the things you're organizing in the CPPA.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that. So it sounds to me like a few items of tactical things, calendar, fast typing, getting things done, and a few items of reaching out to the team, especially to an energized team.
Absolutely. Yes. And some of that is, there's this trade-off always between having the vision of how you want it to be, but taking the input from other people as well. And because I'm a big collaborator, I like to hear what other people have to say. And so sometimes my vision or my expectations have shifted entirely. And that's not always comfortable at the moment, but then you start to see this new vision emerging and taking place. You say, wow, that's so much cooler than I ever could have done on my own.
Good. Nice. As we come to our last question of this interview, I want to ask you, it's sort of a broad question, but you may have a narrow answer. If everyone you came in contact with, so everybody, colleagues, friends, business people, were to take your advice on one thing to change their lives, what would be that one thing that you would tell people to do?
I'm going to go back to my book, Catch People Doing Things Right. Whether it's your kids, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your coworker, your boss, your direct report, your mother-in-law, your dentist.
So how often should you be doing this, Lisa?
As often as I can. You know what's interesting is when I find that I'm in a really grumpy mood, that snaps me out of a grumpy mood. I just, I'm standing in line at the grocery store and I've got to get somewhere and the cashier is taking a very long time and the person in front of me is being really chatty and trying to pay with pennies, whatever it is. And I just kind of stop and say, okay, what is going right here? And for me, because of who I am, it really works to look at the people. Yes, I have ample access to groceries and I'm very privileged, but I'm looking at the dynamics of the people and I'm saying, they're smiling. They're having a good time. That cashier is making somebody's day. That woman who's paying with all her nickels and dimes, she's getting rid of her change. That's a good thing. It's just, that helps me focus, calm, and then I feel a lot better about myself, about everybody's place in the world. It works for me.
Yeah,
so I would give that to everybody else because, if it works for me, it works for everybody, right?
Which is so in line with what you said about individualization earlier on. But catch people doing things right? Thank you so much, Lisa. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you very much, Senia.